Imagine, if you would, a mob of 80,000 heavily armed, deeply traumatized, and just totally unpaid mercenaries.
Right, highly trained killers just sitting there.
Exactly. And they are trapped inside the sprawling, opulent pleasure gardens of this billionaire general. I mean, they are starving, they are angry, and they're surrounded by the unimaginable wealth of an empire that just flat out refuses to pay them for the blood they've shed.
It's a powder keg. I mean, a complete recipe for disaster.
It really is. And they are so furious, so utterly pushed to the edge, that they break into the general's private sacred lake. And they start dragging out these ancient, jewel-encrusted fish. These are creatures believed to be literally divinely blessed, and they boil them alive over roaring campfires.
Yeah, and they do it laughing, which is the crazy part.
Right, they do it laughing. They do it specifically to see if the gods of this empire will, strike them down with lightning.
Testing the boundaries of reality.
Exactly. And when the water boils and the fish die and the sky remains completely silent, well, an entire civilization begins to collapse. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's just the ultimate shattering of a collective illusion. I mean, that moment of silence from the heavens is the exact second a world order just falls apart.
And that is our mission today. We are taking you straight into the dizzyingly vivid, brutal, sensuous, and really completely uncompromising world of Gustave Flaubert's masterpiece, Salammbô.
It's such an overwhelming text.
It is. Because on the surface, this is a historical narrative. It's set in ancient Carthage right after the First Punic War, and it details one of the most horrific conflicts in antiquity.
Right, the Mercenary Revolt,
right.
Or as it's sometimes called, the Truceless War.
Yeah, the Truceless War. But we have a massive stack of sources here, direct textual excerpts, philosophical breakdowns, historical context, and they all reveal that Flaubert was doing something far more ambitious than just recounting history.
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't just writing a textbook.
No, not at all. He was creating this profound, exhausting, philosophical exploration of human nature. How power actually operates, the nature of obsession, and really the terrifying, crushing weight of the divine.
And Flaubert spent years, I mean, literally years, obsessively researching the ruins, the texts, and the surviving artifacts of Carthage just to build this environment.
Right, the level of detail is insane.
It is. He uses this ancient historical canvas to launch these massive philosophical inquiries. But to really grasp the tension, we have to look at the geopolitical reality of the moment.
Okay, set the stage for us.
So Carthage was an absolute economic juggernaut. We are talking about a fabulously wealthy republic. It was a maritime empire run by, ruthless merchants, aristocrats, and priests.
They pretty much controlled trade across the entire Mediterranean.
Exactly. They were the superpower of the sea. But they have just finished a grueling 24-year war with Rome.
And they lost.
They lost disastrously. And here is the critical mechanism of Carthaginian power to fight that decades-long war. They didn't use a citizen army.
Because they were merchants.
Right. They outsourced the violence. They treated war as a merchant enterprise, essentially. They hired an immense, incredibly diverse army of mercenaries.
The sources list them out, and it's just staggering. You have Gauls, Greeks, Libyans, Iberians, Balearic slingers, fugitives, outcasts, men from every corner of the known ancient world.
All fighting under the command of the brilliant Carthaginian general, Hamilcar Barca. But now, the war is over.
Rome has imposed massive indemnities on Carthage. They have to pay up.
Huge reparations. The Republic is functionally bankrupt, or at least severely cash-strapped. So this massive workforce of professional killers is shipped back to Africa and parked right outside the city walls.
Which is terrifying for the citizens, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. And they are owed years of back pay. But the Carthaginian Senate, in this act of just breathtaking arrogance, simply stalls.
They try to nickel and dime them?
Yeah. They try to shortchange them. They try to negotiate down the price of the blood these men have already spilled.
Which sets up this incredible powder keg. Because usually when we think about the structures that hold our lives together, our laws, our economy, our shared social contracts, we imagine them as these solid, unyielding things.
Like they're permanent.
Right. I always think of it like walking on a thick, frozen lake in the dead of winter. You step out onto the ice, you hear the wind, and you just trust it. You don't question the ice, you build a whole life on it. But in this scenario, the ice is groaning.
That's a great analogy. The ice is groaning because the foundation of Carthage's power over these men was purely transactional.
That was just a paycheck.
Exactly. The state didn't inspire loyalty, it merely offered a paycheck. When the paycheck vanishes, the authority vanishes instantly.
I was actually trying to find a modern parallel for this, and it's not some simple labor strike. It's more like a modern government heavily relying on a massive private military company.
Oh, like a Blackwater or a Wagner Group type of situation?
Yeah, exactly. They hire them to fight a horrific overseas war, and then when the contractors come home, the government says, well, actually, the treasury is empty. Good luck.
Which is an insane thing to say to an army.
Right. You now have an army of highly trained, heavily armed, completely alienated fighters sitting on your doorstep, realizing the people in charge have absolutely no leverage left.
And that is the exact dynamic Flaubert drops us into, and he doesn't ease us in at all.
No, he really doesn't.
The narrative begins in media res with a feast that is designed to just overwhelm the senses and illustrate the sheer scale of the decay. The mercenaries have been allowed into the private gardens of their general, Hamilcar, outside the city walls.
The Senate thought feeding them would placate them. Like, here's some food, please calm down.
But the feast is a catastrophe. I mean, calling it a feast doesn't even cover it. Flaubert uses this incredible sensory overload to paint a picture of extreme opulence colliding violently with extreme resentment.
Walk with us through this scene because the details are wild.
So you have tens of thousands of mercenaries from entirely different cultures, all speaking different languages, unleashed in these luxurious gardens. And they're gorging themselves on a scale that just defies belief.
Our sources describe them eating antelopes with their horns still attached. Like, who does that?
Right, and they're eating hedgehogs smothered in a fermented fish sauce called garum. They are eating snails flavored with cumin served on amber plates.
The culinary details Flaubert chooses are so highly specific and philosophically significant, really.
Right.
He mentions dormice confit and these little fat dogs with pink silk-like hair.
Oh, the pink dogs. Yeah.
And they were specifically fattened on olive pomace. To the Carthaginians, these were exquisite delicacies.
But to the Gauls and the Greeks, they were bizarre, sometimes disgusting, but they ate them anyway. Flaubert is giving us an aesthetics of gluttony here.
But taking that a step further, the gluttony isn't just about hunger, is it? I mean, it feels incredibly hostile.
Oh, it is a profoundly hostile political act. The mercenaries are starving, yes, but they are starving for justice. They are owed their wages.
So they eat the wealth instead.
Precisely. Because they cannot extract the gold they are owed from the treasury, they decide to literally consume the wealth of the empire in the form of its most prized possessions. They are eating Hamilcar's wealth.
Wow.
And the sheer sensory overload of the scene, the blinding light of the torches, the deafening clash of a dozen different languages, the smell of roasting meat mixed with heavy, cloying perfumes.
And the casual destruction of ivory stools and silver plates.
Right. It is a physical manifestation of a broken social contract. Flaubert is showing us the messy, grotesque reality of what happens when a transactional relationship dissolves.
The tool realizes it has more physical power than the hand holding it. Which leads us back to that incredible moment with the fish.
A sacred fish.
Yes. Because the drinking accelerates, the resentment boils over, and this hostile consumption evolves into outright sacrilege. They stumble upon this private, enclosed lake in the center of the gardens.
The sacred lake of the Barca family. And again, Flaubert's attention to detail elevates the philosophical stakes here.
These aren't just decorative koi fish.
No, not at all. The text tells us these fish are believed to descend from primordial lotuses. They are the fish that supposedly hatched the mystic egg that hid the goddess.
They literally have jewels embedded in their gills.
They do. They represent the ancient lineage, the divine favor, and the untouchable nature of the Carthaginian elite.
And the mercenaries look at these sacred, jewel-encrusted avatars of the gods, and they decide to cook them.
Just out of spite.
Yeah, they build fires right there on the pristine marble. They throw the fish into brass pots and watch them boil. And our sources point out something fascinating here. The text explicitly says that the idea of committing a sacrilege actually revives their appetites.
That is the crux of it. Why does sacrilege make them hungry? Because they are testing the cosmological boundaries of the world they inhabit.
Let's unpack that. What do you mean by cosmological boundaries?
Well, in the ancient worldview, the sacred is protected by the threat of immediate catastrophic violence from the divine. To destroy a sacred object is to invite a lightning bolt. It is an invitation for the earth to swallow you whole.
So they're poking the universe to see if the universe bites back.
And the universe does nothing. The water boils, the fish die, the sky remains totally empty.
Man.
The philosophical weight of this silence cannot be overstated. If the gods of Carthage cannot even protect their own sacred fish from a bunch of drunken, unpaid soldiers, then the gods are weak.
And if the gods are weak, then the Republic of Carthage is utterly powerless.
Exactly. The psychological barrier of fear that kept 80,000 men in check completely dissolves in that boiling water.
The ice just cracks wide open. The illusion is dead. And it's right at this moment when the fires are roaring, the mercenaries are drunk on wine and sacrilege, and the absolute collapse of order seems inevitable that the doors of the palace open.
And everything just stops.
Because Salammbô appears. Let's talk about this entrance because the contrast is just staggering.
It's one of the greatest entrances in literature.
Truly. You have this sweaty, blood-stained, violent, deafening mob of men. And descending the massive central staircase of the palace is this ethereal vision. Hamilcar's daughter.
Salammbô.
The sources describe her appearance in a way that just burns into your brain. Her hair is powdered with violet sand and piled incredibly high in the shape of a tower.
She is covered in diamonds that the text actually compares to the scales of a moray eel.
Wow, yeah. She wears a dark purple mantle that drags behind her. She is surrounded by pale, hairless eunuch priests playing lyres. And she doesn't yell, she doesn't demand silence.
No, she is chanting.
Right, she chants in an old Canaanite idiom. It's the ancient liturgical language of her people, singing of the mythological journeys of the god Melkart and the cosmic origins of Carthage.
And crucially, the text makes a point of noting that the mercenaries do not understand a single word she is saying.
I really have to pause on that because logically it feels totally backward.
How?
Well, if you are a single woman walking into a violent riot of 80,000 men who just destroyed your property and mocked your gods, communication seems like step one.
You'd want to say, stop, we will pay you.
Exactly. But the sources emphasize that because she sings in a language they don't understand, it actually mesmerizes them. Why does her incomprehensibility give her control over a mob that just prove they don't care about her gods?
It's one of Flaubert's most brilliant psychological insights, really, and it comes down to the philosophical distinction between the grotesque and the sublime.
Okay, unpack those terms for us. How are we defining them here?
Think of the grotesque as the messy, chaotic, visceral reality of earthly survival. The mercenaries, covered in grease and wine, screaming about their back pay, boiling fish, they are the absolute embodiment of the grotesque.
It's flesh, it's hunger, it's violence.
Exactly. The sublime, on the other hand, is a philosophical concept referring to that which is so vast, so ancient, so incredibly alien that it bypasses our rational mind entirely.
Like staring into a canyon or something.
Right. It strikes directly at our sense of awe and terror. A massive, terrifying thunderstorm is sublime.
So by speaking a dead language and looking like an alien priestess, she is weaponizing the sublime.
That's exactly what she's doing. If she had come down the stairs and spoken to them in common Greek or Punic, if she had argued with them about ledgers and back pay, she would have lowered herself to the realm of the grotesque.
She would have just been a person.
She would have become a mortal woman engaged in a contract dispute, and frankly, they probably would have killed her on the spot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But by speaking an incomprehensible tongue, by moving like a phantom wrapped in violet dust and diamonds, she ceases to be human to them. She becomes the idea of Carthage itself. Cold, ancient, untouchable.
So her incomprehensibility is her armor. Because they can't process her logically, they are forced to process her mythically.
And it forces the mercenaries to suddenly confront the mystery of the divine again. They thought they had defeated the gods by boiling the fish, but then the very avatar of the divine glides down the stairs.
Completely unafraid of them.
Chanting a language older than their civilizations, it paralyzes them.
It paralyzes almost all of them. But it triggers something entirely different in one specific man. And this is where the plot really detonates. Matho. He is a Libyan mercenary, a massive, muscular, terrifyingly strong soldier. And when he sees Salammbô, he is instantly struck.
But the source material is very careful to distinguish this from some classic romantic love at first sight trope.
Right. This isn't Romeo and Juliet. This isn't a man seeing a pretty girl at a party.
Not at all. We have to view Matho's reaction through a philosophical lens. The sources describe his desire as an ontological obsession.
Ontological meaning? relating to the very nature of being. Like, he doesn't just want her physically. He wants to possess the core of her existence.
Yes, exactly. When Matho looks at Salammbô, he doesn't just see a beautiful woman. He sees the physical manifestation of the empire that has simultaneously oppressed him, employed him, and defined his entire reality.
Because she is Carthage to him.
She is the sublime. She is Carthage. His desire for her is aggressive and existential. He wants to conquer her because he wants to consume the divine essence she represents. He wants to pull the untouchable down into the dirt with him.
It's almost like he wants to eat the concept of power itself. He wants to possess the very thing that makes Carthage feel superior to him.
And that obsession sets the entire trajectory of the tragedy.
Because Matho cannot let this go.
Which leads to one of the most fascinating psychological heists in all of literature, because to possess Salammbô, Matho realizes he has to possess the divine power that protects her.
And he doesn't come to this realization alone, which is key. This is where we are introduced to one of the most compelling characters in the text. Spendius?
Spendius is the Greek slave.
Spendius is a survivor. He is a former slave, a runaway, incredibly cunning, and just the ultimate pragmatist.
He's the foil to Matho. Exactly. While Matho is drowning in this existential, almost mystical obsession, Spendius is looking at the board like a grandmaster playing chess. Spendius sees Matho's obsession not as a spiritual crisis, but as an incredible political opportunity.
Because Spendius wants to burn Carthage to the ground.
Yeah.
He wants revenge on the empire that enslaved him, and he needs this giant Libyan warlord to lead the army to do it.
Precisely. But Spendius knows he can't just tell Matho to attack the walls. Matho is paralyzed by his awe of Salammbô and the gods she represents.
He's too terrified of the divine.
Right. So Spendius constructs a brilliant psychological manipulation. He convinces Matho that the only way to truly possess Salammbô, to break her untouchable aura and to defeat Carthage, is to sneak into the city and steal its most sacred object.
The Zaïmph. The sacred veil of Tanit. Tanit is the moon goddess, the ultimate protector of Carthage. Her veil is kept deep within the innermost secret sanctum of her temple on the Acropolis.
And the belief in the city, a belief shared by everyone, from the high priests down to the lowest slaves, is that the veil is the goddess, or at least it contains her literal essence.
The doctrine is absolute. As long as Carthage possesses the Zaïmph, the city cannot fall.
And so we get this terrifying, stealthy descent. Under the cover of darkness, Spendius and Matho break into the city through the aqueducts and infiltrate the temple.
Flaubert's description of their journey through the temple complex is an absolute masterclass in atmospheric dread.
Oh, it really is.
They pass through layers and layers of secrecy. They walk past sleeping priestesses who look like heavily tattooed idols. They navigate through corridors filled with symbols of cosmic fecundity and celestial terror.
The air is described as thick with heavy perfumes, blinding dust, and oppressive heat. It feels like they're walking into the subconscious mind of the empire.
Because they are. They are descending into the irrational, beating heart of Carthaginian power. And when they finally reach the innermost chamber, there it is, the Zaïmph.
The text describes it as a bluish mantle, covered in starry, luminous rays, practically hovering in the gloom.
And Matho, this barbarian mercenary, steps forward and does the unthinkable. He touches it.
And he doesn't just touch it, he wraps it around himself like a cloak.
And the psychological shift that happens to him the second that fabric touches his skin is unbelievable. The sources quote him directly. He wraps himself in the veil and instantly claims, "I am more than a man now."
He says he could walk through fire.
He says he could walk through the sea. He feels completely supremely transfigured into a demigod.
Which forces us to ask a massive epistemological question. A question about how we know what we know and where reality actually lives.
Where does power truly reside?
Exactly. Does it reside in the physical object itself? Does it reside in the military force guarding the city? Or does it reside entirely in the minds of the people who collectively agree to believe in it?
I was thinking about this extensively because it is so relevant to how our modern world operates. The Zaïmph is the ultimate example of fiat power.
Fiat power, right?
Think about fiat currency today. A $100 bill is just a piece of paper. It is physically worthless. You can't eat it. You can't build a house out of it.
It's just cotton and ink.
But because we all universally, across the globe, collectively agree to participate in the illusion of its value, you can trade that piece of paper for food, for shelter, for human labor. It moves armies.
That's a profound way to look at it.
The power isn't in the ink. The power is in our collective psychological submission to the symbol.
That is an excellent framework. The Zaïmph is the fiat currency of Carthaginian divine favor. The illusion of legitimacy, the entire structure of the empire's psychological dominance is totally dependent on that symbol remaining untouchable and locked away.
So when Matho walks in and simply picks up the veil,
he doesn't just steal a piece of fabric, he bankrupts the psychological treasury of the entire civilization.
And the craziest part is it works. When Matho walks out of the temple, sneaks out of the city gates, and appears before the mercenary army wearing the zaïmph, they don't look at him and say, "Hey Matho, nice blanket."
No, they don't see a piece of cloth.
The text explicitly notes that the barbarians immediately fell to the ground because they felt a genius had come upon them.
Because they all share this underlying, deeply superstitious worldview, the moment he possesses the symbol, the reality of power shifts in real time.
He isn't just a general anymore. He is validated by the universe.
No.
The veil literally makes him the unquestioned leader.
But Flaubert is the master of irony. The tragedy is already locking into place. Spendius got what he wanted. A warlord clothed in divine authority, ready to burn Carthage.
But for Matho, it backfires.
Totally. The veil was supposed to be a tool to conquer his obsession with Salammbô. Instead, wearing the mantle of her goddess just makes him feel closer to her, more intimately entangled with the divine essence she embodies.
It doesn't quench his thirst. It deepens the sickness.
He is trapped by his own sacrilege.
He thought he was taking control, but the symbol is taking control of him. And meanwhile, inside the walls of Carthage, the realization that the zaïmph is gone triggers absolute existential panic.
The ice hasn't just cracked, it is shattered.
The city feels it has been entirely abandoned by its protector. The mercenaries now have the psychological upper hand, and the truceless war explodes into open conflict.
And this conflict is where Flaubert strips away every last polite fiction we tell ourselves about human civilization. Hamilcar takes command of the Carthaginian forces, and what follows is a war of attrition, ambushes, sieges, and unimaginable, sickening cruelty.
The sources describe a level of deprivation that is genuinely hard to read. Flaubert doesn't spare us any detail.
The mercenaries are eventually trapped by Hamilcar in a desolate gorge called the Defile of the Axe.
And famine strikes. Famine so absolute that they are reduced to eating the leather scraps of their sandals. They are drinking the urine of their mules.
And eventually, the camaraderie of the camp, this multi-ethnic brotherhood of warriors that we saw at the feast, completely disintegrates.
They turn on each other. We see these hardened men reduced to cannibalism, to absolute animal savagery.
By pushing the human body to the extreme limit of starvation, Flaubert is demonstrating how fragile moral and philosophical constructs truly are.
When you are starving to death, concepts like honor, solidarity, and justice simply evaporate.
You are left only with the grotesque reality of biological survival. The human being is reduced to a machine that must consume to exist.
And this is the crucial pivot. It is not just the barbarians in the dirt who descend into savagery. It's the highly civilized, impossibly wealthy citizens inside the pristine walls of Carthage, too.
Right. The collapse happens on both sides of the wall.
And this is the part of the source material that I found deeply challenging. Inside the city, the despair over the war, the famine hitting the civilian population, and the psychological devastation of losing the zaïmph leads the elders of the Senate to a horrific conclusion.
They believe the gods are angry.
And specifically, they believe they have neglected their most terrifying deity, the sun god, the devourer, Moloch.
In their absolute panic, the Carthaginian elite turn to the most extreme right of their religion. They believe they must balance the cosmic scales.
They decide they must sacrifice their own children. And not just any children, not orphans or the children of slaves. The priests demand the children of the elite, the patricians, the rulers of the city.
The text describes this nightmarish apocalyptic scene in the center of the city at night. There is a colossal brazen statue of Moloch. Inside the statue is a roaring furnace.
And the statue has mechanical arms. It is designed so that when a living child is placed onto its extended hands, the weight triggers a pulley system, the arms tilt backward, and the victim is dropped alive into the fire.
It is arguably the most harrowing sequence in 19th century literature. The drums are beating rhythmically to drown out the screams. The priests are chanting.
The wealthy elite of Carthage, adorned in their finest jewels, are standing in the plaza watching their own future, their own heirs being fed into a machine.
This is horrific.
I really have to push back here, though, and I mean genuinely push back on the interpretation of this scene. The text frames this as a calculation by the priests. But isn't this just mass hysteria? I mean, how does a highly advanced civilization, a society of astronomers, of master architects, of global merchants who invented complex naval logistics, justify throwing their own children into a mechanical furnace? When humans are terrified, we don't do math, we panic. Are we sure this is a calculated religious rite and not just a society having a collective traumatic breakdown?
It looks like a breakdown from our modern perspective, certainly, but Flaubert forces us to look at the underlying logic of their worldview. It is math to them. It is what we can call the economics of faith.
The economics of faith.
In the Carthaginian mindset, religion is ruthlessly transactional. It is an extension of their merchant culture. They do not view the gods as loving parents or moral guides. The gods are cosmic creditors. The universe operates on a strict, unyielding ledger of debts and payments.
A literal ledger of blood.
Yes. Think about it from their perspective. Carthage has enjoyed centuries of unimaginable wealth, naval dominance, and power. They believe they have accrued a massive metaphysical debt to the gods for all of this success.
They owe the gods for making them rich.
Right. Now, the Republic is facing ultimate destruction. The mercenaries are at the gates. The veil is gone. The ledger is hopelessly unbalanced. To right the scales, to force the universe to intervene and save them, they must pay the highest possible premium.
They believe a transaction regulating the needs of humanity and the demands of the gods must be balanced by pain.
Since Moloch is the god of the sun and destruction, he delights in horror. Since Carthage needs the ultimate salvation, they must offer the ultimate, most agonizing asset they possess.
So to them, it isn't madness. It isn't a loss of control. It is a terrifyingly rational economic calculation taken to its darkest, most logical extreme.
It is a mathematical equation of suffering. If X is the threat to the city, Y must equal the suffering of the patrician class to cancel it out.
Wow.
And for you, the listener, this raises a deeply uncomfortable philosophical mirror. We might look at the mechanical Moloch statue as barbaric ancient history, Orientalist horror drawn up by a French novelist. But what are modern societies willing to sacrifice when faced with existential panic?
That's a heavy thought.
When the core of our civilization, our economy, our security, our way of life feels genuinely threatened, what principles, what vulnerable groups, what aspects of our future are we willing to throw into the furnace of self-preservation?
When you frame it as the furnace of self-preservation, it stops feeling like ancient history. Because fear strips away our morality just as quickly as starvation does. It just dresses it up in different rituals.
Exactly.
And in the midst of all this cosmic panic, as the ashes are literally falling over the city, the priests realize that even the sacrifices to Moloch might not be enough. The ledger is still unbalanced because their shield is missing. They need the Zaïmph back.
Which brings us to the most intimate and psychologically complex part of the narrative, the collision of Salammbô and Matho.
The high priest of Tanit, a man named Shahabarim, realizes what needs to be done.
Shahabarim is such a dark, fascinating figure. He is this gaunt, brilliant, deeply cynical eunuch priest. He was Salammbô's tutor.
He knows that Matho is obsessed with her.
And he realizes that Salammbô is the only weapon Carthage has that can penetrate Matho's camp and reclaim the veil.
Shahabarim represents cold institutional dogma, right?
He does. What makes him so compelling and so dangerous is that the sources suggest he harbors his own secret doubts about the gods. He is an intellectual. He has studied foreign philosophies, astronomy, the movement of the spheres.
He's looked behind the curtain.
But precisely because he has peered into the void and seen the emptiness, he enforces the dogma even more rigidly on his pupil. He views Salammbô not as a human being, not as a young woman he raised, but merely as a tool of the state, a vessel to be utilized for the survival of the institution.
He goes to her in her chambers, and he essentially manipulates her. He gaslights her into believing that it is her divine destiny, her absolute unavoidable duty to the gods and to the city, to go alone into the barbarian camp, find Matho's tent, and reclaim the Zaïmph.
And notice how he instructs her. He doesn't give her a tactical plan. He doesn't even tell her exactly what to expect from this warlord.
He just sends her in blind.
He simply tells her she must submit to whatever happens, framing the entire terrifying ordeal as the order of heaven. He strips her of her agency before she even leaves the palace.
So Salammbô, who has been fasting, who has been purified with strange incantations, who is wrapped in these highly symbolic garments, sneaks out of the gates of Carthage. She walks through the devastated landscape, right into the heart of the mercenary camp, and steps straight into Matho's tent.
And this encounter is the philosophical climax of the entire narrative, because when she enters the tent, drops her disguise, and reveals herself, Matho's reaction shatters every expectation of how a conquering general behaves.
He completely falls apart. The man who has brought the greatest empire on earth to its knees, the man who wears the sacred veil of the goddess like a cape, literally falls to the dirt floor.
He is undone.
The sources say he is breathless, his teeth are chattering, he kisses her toes. He is utterly paralyzed by her physical presence.
He is confronted with the sublime in the flesh, and it breaks him. He doesn't act like a conqueror, he acts like a supplicant.
He starts babbling. He tells her that he doesn't care about Carthage anymore. He says, I abandon the army, I renounce everything.
He offers to run away with her to some mythical, secluded island covered in gold dust and green trees.
He is willing to throw away his revenge, the lives of his men, his entire life's work, just to possess her. It's an incredible display of total submission to desire.
But we have to look closely at Salammbô's reaction. Is she moved by this massive display of vulnerability and devotion? Does this spark a romance?
No. Not even slightly. She is terrified, she is disgusted, but most importantly, she is entirely passive. She doesn't fight him, but she doesn't embrace him either.
She's enveloped in this mystical, almost narcotic trance.
The text says she felt a weakness where she lost all consciousness of herself, feeling that an order from the gods forced her to yield. The sacred gold chain that links her ankles, a massive symbol of her virginity and her dedication to the goddess, breaks. They embrace.
And then later, while he is sleeping, exhausted by his own passion, she simply takes the zaïmph, steps over him, and walks out of the camp.
We really need to delve into the profound ambiguity of Salammbô's agency here. The philosophical question Flaubert is asking is, does she even have a self left to surrender?
When she submits to Matho, is she acting out of free will? Is it patriotic duty? Is it religious fervor? Or has she been so thoroughly hollowed out and indoctrinated by Shahabarim and the state that she is literally just an automaton executing a program?
It genuinely feels like she has no autonomous self. She was raised as a symbol, and she acts as a symbol. She doesn't experience desire, she experiences duty.
Which creates a staggering tragic irony. In that tent, two forms of absolute bondage collide. Matho attained the ultimate symbol of power, the zaïmph. He used it to build an army and conquer his enemies.
But the moment the human embodiment of his obsession appears, he realizes political power means nothing to him.
He is a slave to his internal desires. Salammbô, on the other hand, is a slave to external duty. He wants to possess the divine. She believes she is possessed by it.
Neither of them is truly free.
They are both crushed by the metaphysical weight of what the other represents.
And speaking of being crushed, that collision in the tent, her reclaiming of the veil, sets up the brutal, unrelenting finale of this deep dive. Salammbô returns to Carthage with the zaïmph.
And the psychological shift happens all over again, but in reverse.
The city's confidence is instantly restored. The mercenaries realize their divine mandate is gone, and the end is horrific.
Without the veil, the mercenary army loses its cohesion and its psychological edge. Hamilcar's forces, now aided by the Numidian prince Narhavas,
who opportunistically betrays the mercenaries and brings his devastating war elephants to Hamilcar's side.
Right, they finally corner the remnants of the revolt.
The slaughter is absolute. The descriptions of the battlefield, the elephants crushing bodies, the starvation, the final desperate stands of the barbarians, it's apocalyptic. Matho's massive army is entirely annihilated.
But Matho himself, the great, terrifying Libyan giant, is deliberately kept alive. He is captured in nets like a wild beast.
Because the Carthaginians don't just want to execute him. Death is too simple.
They need to systematically dismantle him as a public, ritualistic spectacle. They need to strip him of all the power and humanity he dared to claim.
And Flaubert times this execution with devastating precision. On the very day of Salammbô's wedding to Narhavas, which is, naturally, a cold political marriage rewarding the prince for his cavalry and his betrayal, Matho is subjected to a horrific run of torture.
He is forced to run a gauntlet through the steep, winding streets of Carthage. The entire population is out, lining the terraces and the alleys, and they are armed with whatever they can find: whips, hot irons, shards of glass.
They are tearing at his flesh, burning him, beating him as he runs.
By the end of it, he is reduced to a bloody, unrecognizable shape, running blindly on some primal animal instinct to escape the pain.
It is agonizing to read. It's the grotesque taken to its absolute maximum, and his run culminates at the grand terrace of the temple, the very pinnacle of the city.
This is where the wedding feast is taking place.
This is where Salammbô sits on a throne, radiant, covered in jewels, next to her new husband. It is the absolute peak of Carthaginian triumph. Matho, missing flesh, missing his eyes. The text specifically says he had no human appearance left except for his eyes. Stumbles to the very foot of the terrace. He looks up, and he sees her.
And she looks down at him.
The sources describe this incredibly powerful, entirely silent exchange between them. Salammbô looks at this destroyed mass of a man, and suddenly the cheering crowd, the noise, the incense, the political victory of the wedding, it all just vanishes for her.
The text says a silence was made in her soul.
She remembers the tent. She remembers his voice when he was babbling, offering her the world. And in that exact moment of connection, Matho falls backward and dies right there at her feet.
It is a moment of total finality. The thread is extinguished. And immediately after he falls, as the crowd roars in triumph and the high priest approaches with a golden cup to offer a toast to the genius of Carthage and the survival of the Republic,
Salammbô rises.
She takes the cup to drink, and she falls back dead.
Just like that. No weapon, no assassin. She drops dead on her wedding throne.
Yes. And Flaubert delivers the final, devastating, iconic line of the novel, which is highlighted in our sources. Thus died the daughter of Hamilcar for having touched the mantle of Tanit.
We really have to unpack that. For having touched the mantle of Tanit, why must she die? She didn't have any physical wounds. Was it a delayed poison? Was it the shock of seeing Matho destroyed?
Flaubert isn't interested in giving us a medical diagnosis. He is delivering a philosophical conclusion. We can call it the tragedy of the absolute.
The tragedy of the absolute. Let's explore that. What does that mean in the context of everything we've discussed?
Throughout the entire text, the zaïmph, the mantle of Tanit, has functioned as a symbol of the absolute. It is the immediated essence of the gods, the ultimate source of power.
The raw current of the universe.
And the philosophical premise Flaubert leaves us with is that the mortal human frame is simply too fragile to survive direct contact with the absolute. Matho touched the absolute through his total, consuming, pure obsession with Salammbô.
He abandoned reason, he abandoned politics, he gave himself over entirely to an absolute passion.
And it led him to be physically shredded, reduced to literal meat by the mob.
The absolute consumed him from the inside out. And Salammbô.
Salammbô touched the absolute in two distinct ways. First, she physically wrapped herself in the zaïmph to steal it back from the tent, temporarily stepping into the role of the goddess herself, bearing the weight of the empire's survival.
And second?
Second, and perhaps more fatally, she experienced the absolute, unyielding devotion of Matho in that tent. She, a woman who had lived her entire life in the realm of abstract, cold dogma, who was treated merely as a political symbol by her own father and her priest, was suddenly touched by the raw, terrifying fire of absolute, unconditional human passion.
She saw someone who worshipped her, not just the goddess she represented.
Exactly. When Matho dies at her feet, that raw connection is severed. The psychological and spiritual weight of having existed even for a moment in the realm of the absolute is simply too much.
The mortal frame shatters under the pressure.
You cannot touch the divine, whether it is absolute political power, absolute obsessive desire, or the absolute presence of the gods, and walk away whole.
It burns you up. The ice breaks and you fall into the freezing water.
Yeah.
That is haunting. And it brings us to the end of this incredibly intense journey.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. We started with an opulent, gluttonous feast, where an empire's saviors realized they were just unpaid tools and decided to test the heavens. We traveled through the theft of a sacred veil that shifted the psychological balance of the world.
Down into the darkest, most terrifying economics of human sacrifice to a mechanical god.
And finally, to the dusty, bloody death of two people who were totally crushed by the symbols they tried to control.
It is a profound masterclass in showing how societies actually function, how collective belief operates, and how fragile we truly are when the structures we invent suddenly demand our lives as payment to balance the ledger.
Which brings me back to you, the listener, and that frozen lake we talked about at the very beginning. We don't have a zaïmph today. We don't have a glowing purple veil sitting in a temple on a hill that guarantees our national safety.
Or do we?
Right. I want you to consider the zaïmphs in your own life, in our modern society. What are the untouchable symbols, the unquestioned institutions, or the collective illusions that we all just implicitly agree to believe in? Is it the fiat currency in your bank account? Is it a constitution written on old parchment? Is it the concept of a border?
And the truly provocative thought to take with you is this. How fragile would our reality become if someone, a modern Matho, simply walked in, picked up that sacred symbol, exposed it as just a piece of fabric, a piece of paper, or a hollow idea, and walked out?
Would the lightning strike them down? Or would we, like Carthage, find ourselves suddenly staring into the abyss, realizing the gods are silent and the ice is cracking beneath our feet?
It's a terrifying question.
It's something to seriously mull over the next time you find yourself blindly trusting the solid ground beneath you. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us into the beautiful, brutal, and utterly terrifying world of Salammbô. Until next time, keep questioning the ice.